Welcome to today's presentation, where we're going to discuss how to build software solutions with. Be ready for the surprise. No code, and no IT professionals. Yes, you heard me. Building software solutions without developing any code, and even more foolish, without the support of any IT professionals. Sounds like a crazy idea, right? Well, let's see if this is. While the idea of building software solutions with no code and without bringing in any IT professionals might sound a little out there, let's still be structured in this discussion. So, here is our menu of the day. We'll first discuss and define what the Hyper-Agile software development lifecycle is. We'll then unfold the secret of this insanity, presenting what low-code/no-code application development platforms are. And, with the understanding of Hyper-Agile SDLC and LCNC, we'll turn this craziness into reality. But, first discussing how we can assess whether an idea is a good candidate for Hyper-Agile LCNC approach. And, second, we'll provide you with a real-world example of an application that was designed, built and deployed without the assistance of any IT professionals and without having to write any line of code. Does that sound like a plan? Alright, let's start with the basics, and go over a traditional software development lifecycle, where each development step is performed sequentially, from design to maintenance, via the requirement gathering, design, build, testing and deployment. Typically, from inception to delivery, we might look at 6 months to decades. And, as you have guessed it, in the Hyper-Agile SDLC, these phases are done iteratively and in an extremely fast-paced. Indeed, as opposed to the standard Agile SDLC iterations where iterations can last from 1 to 4 weeks, in Hyper-Agile, iterations are significantly shorter, often lasting just a few days or even hours. Another key difference with the standard Agile SDLC is in regards to testing, where here, we are not doing a comprehensive testing. We only test the critical functionality, and yes, this means that in Hyper-Agile, the risk tolerance is higher because we want speedy product releases. And yes, this implies that the team must be prepared to quickly address issues that arise in the production environment. Long story short, as opposed to standard Agile SDLC, Hyper-Agile is not suited for all organizations and not suited for all projects as the increased pace may introduce challenges in terms of stability, coordination, and quality assurance. So, thus are drawbacks to keep in mind if you envision Hyper-Agile may be suited for one of your projects. That said, on top of these important points, to turn an idea into a released product in just hours, Hyper-Agile SDLC leverages a very peculiar set of tools. And this is what we're going to talk about next. Enter the low-code and no-code application development platforms. These platforms can be seen as a one-stop shop for non-IT professionals to design, build and deploy software solutions. More specifically, these platforms provide advanced graphical interface allowing non-IT professionals to simply drag and drop pre-built components and link them logically through simple workflows. As you guess, the low-code platforms also allow their users to extend built-in capabilities through minimal coding, for example, creating JavaScripts to customize the behavior of user interface. While the no-code platforms don't have these extensions. Last but not least, both low-code and no-code application development platforms provide their users with the underlying infrastructure to run the built applications, from storage to compute capabilities. So, these platforms are truly catered toward organizations that want to move fast on their ideas, without having to deal with all the IT-related constraints we are all aware of, the lack of skilled resources, the time and costs associated with managing an IT infrastructure, and so on. Thus, as you can easily guess, these LCNC platforms are critical enablers for organizations that need and want to respond even faster to their internal and external customers. And if you add to these platforms the concept of hyper-agility, I'm sure you can sense that we're getting somewhere very intriguing. Alright, now that we have a good understanding what Hyper-Agile SDLC is and what the low-code/no-code application development platforms are, let us go one step further and determine whether a project can be a good candidate for building the underlying product using both. And to do so, there are 4 basic steps to do this evaluation. Craft the project concept. This step is not required but recommended as it helps the project initiator to deep dive into the actual problem to address and the possible solutions by answering the 5 Ws and H questions. The second step is to complete the project proposal. This proposal should provide the necessary information for the team to understand the ask and prioritize it. It also helps create an initial product backlog for the project. In this third step, we perform a spot assessment, which consists in evaluating if the submitted project is indeed a good candidate for Hyper-Agile LCNC approach. This assessment consists in answering a few questions to determine the risk and technical complexity of solution to build. Last, based on the spot assessment results, the team can initiate the relevant Hyper-Agile LCNC path. There are 3 possible paths. 1. Fast track, for projects that are low risk and low technical complexity. These projects can be initiated the same day. 2. Assisted, for projects that are medium risk and technical complexity, and where some support from IT is needed. 3. IT delivery, for projects that have high risk and technical complexity, then, there's no shortcut. IT must be engaged and lead the project execution. But, enough theory. Let us put this process in action. Alright, let's go over this evaluation process for a real-life example, an online application called Certrivia. As its source, this application aims at addressing a very simple user story. As a candidate to a new certification, I want to test my skills, answering sample questions so that I'm well prepared to take and pass the certification exam. This basic user story can be further refined using the project concept worksheet that help the project initiator to answer the 5 Ws and H questions. So in the case, the who are the candidates. The what, the problem to be solved, is to how we can assist the candidate increase their change to pass. The where, which guide us to create an application that is available online. The why, because, as a candidate, I felt there was no free online solution available. The when, as soon as possible. And the how the candidate will benefit from this application. Next, using the information gathered while crafting the project concept, we can create a project proposal. This proposal should help provide the context and value of this project to the team. If you'd like, it's like a simplified business case for the project. More importantly, this proposal should help get the next step done, the spot assessment. The spot assessment has 2 parts. The suitability scorecard, which helps answer if the proposed project is a valid candidate for a Hyper-Agile LCNC approach. There's no passing or failing grade here, but the higher the score on the scorecard, the higher the project is a good candidate for an Hyper-Agile LCNC approach. The risk/technical grids that help evaluate the risks associated with the application to build as well as the technical complexity to build it. So, let's look at the completed suitability scorecard. In our case, the project scored D16 out of 25, so just on that score, we cannot rule anything yet. Now, in regards to risks, we can see there's no much risks at all here. And naturally, the lower the risk is, the higher the project is a good candidate for a Hyper-Agile LCNC approach. That said, this doesn't tell us yet if it's a good candidate. We now need to look at the technical complexity of the project, which is done with this simple assessment that aid determining the level of expertise that is required to build the application user interface, front-end and back-end processing and data structures, as well as integrate the application with the organization's broader IT environment, if necessary. And finally, we just need to plug the result of the risk and technical complexity assessment into the grid, and see where the project lands in the Hyper-Agile LCNC possible paths. Obviously, the higher the project score on the risk and complexity, the more experienced the team needs to be with LCNC application development platforms, and the support from IT might be needed. And in our case, the fast-track paths sound appropriate, which means that this project can proceed with building the underlying solution leveraging the Hyper-Agile SDLC and LCNC application development platform. So what does that mean exactly? First, today, I won't dive into the specific activities that are required when we deal a project that required some IT support, when a project has medium to high risks and needs to leverage a path where either IT provides some type of support, or take the full lead on the project execution. But if you want to know more, I can certainly do a follow-up video on this. Just add your comment, and I'll work on that. Okay? But for now, let's assume the Certrivia project is a go, and we kick off the work. Let's dive into design phase, and in phase, we first and foremost must select the low-code/no-code application development platform that best suit the solution to be built. As we discussed, there are many LCNC platforms available, and so, it's important to pick the right platform. To build Certrivia, my core requirements were simple. I have no funding, so I needed an open source platform that could be later expanded to a higher tier support. I want to work offline when possible so that I can design on the go, and push my changes online when I'm ready. I want a build environment that doesn't require a huge learning curve. So, I explored a couple of LCNC, including Quixy, Zoho Creator, API in and out systems, and opted to proceed with the latter. And 2 days later, Certrivia was up and running. So, let's take a look at the demo. And feel free to give it a try. I have added the link to the site in the description. But, keep in mind that this version is only a beta version, but the provided UI and features could be extended very easily. First, let's select the certification and the practice exam we want to take. Second, let's answer a couple of questions. Carefully read the question, the different answers, and select the correct answer. And finally, when we're done, we can review our score. Alright, to wrap up, let's take a closer look at how this application was built. So, as anything else, it all starts with data. And when we talk about data, we first must think about the logical model. In this case, we have a list of certifications. For each certification, we have a certain number of quiz or exams. Each certification and quiz have list of defined questions. And obviously, we need to document the result when the candidate answer the exams. And so, this gives us our model. There's no IT need here. It's all logical. The next step is to create this data model into this tool, using a what you see is what you get editor. Next, let's talk about the user experience. First, we think about the user experience, and the journey we want the candidate to have when using the application. In our case, we want the user to 1. View the list of certification and quiz available, and select one. 2. Read the question, review the answers and select one. 3. Review its score. So, once the journey is defined, we design and can build the underlying user interfaces. And, here again, to build it, we simply have to drop and position the different UI widgets we need, using a what you see is what you get editor. And naturally, once the UI is built, the next step is to add the user interactions. To simplify, we can understand the required work on the UI side in 2 folds. First, to initialize the UI by querying the data needed, manipulating the queried data according to the UI requirements and present this data to the user. And obviously, we want the UI to enable and respond to the available user actions by updating or creating new data, in this case, capturing the answer provided by the candidate. And again, to achieve that with low-code/no-code application development platform, it's all about being logical, and think about the UI as a series of workflow to with both client and server simple operations. For example, for the UI presenting the question and possible answers to the users, first we query the quiz name and retrieve the first or next question identifier to render. Then we query database to get the detail of that question. Finally, when the user has answered the question and submit its response, we want to store the response and then decide if we should stay on the same screen for the next question, or present the candidate with the results when it's the last question. And obviously, once we're done implementing the logic on the front-end side, we can take care of the server operations. And here, again, it's all about defining the workflow of the operations we want the server to execute, which are typically operations that manipulate data, creating, updating, deleting records, or doing some type of calculations, like calculating the score of the exam. And, when you're done, the only thing remaining is to build and deploy your application. And this can be done in one click. Just click Publish. And you're done. Your application is now live and available to your users. And you did it with no code and no IT professionals support. How cool is that, right? Okay. Before wrapping up this short presentation, allow me to tell you about my book, The Agile Practitioner's Survival Guide. This guide leaves out the fluff and presents a practical path to adopting and integrating Agile in your company, highlighting different methodologies and diving into the Scrum methodology. Plus, earlier this year, I re-edited it to integrate everything I've learned in the past 6 years applying Scrum in various clients and industries. Above all else, I hope that this re-edition will prove to be even more useful and practical for those who utilize it. Alright. That's all for today. Obviously, there's much more that we could dive into when it comes to the design and build of low-code/no-code based applications, from the overall organization governance to put in place around theses types of solution to the best practices for leveraging these tools. But, that's all the time we have today. So, thank you so much for watching. And, as always, feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and in the meantime, have a great day.